Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Caleb Rothy. I'm the Percussion Education Coordinator for WGI, and this is our fourth edition of the Percussion Community Webinar Series that we've been doing this season. Our special guest tonight is Tim Fairbanks. Tim is the designer and program coordinator for RhythmX, Centerville High School, and then I also know he does a lot of design and consultation for a number of different programs around the country in all of our different classes and paradigms. So, Tim, thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thanks for having me.
Hey, just a couple of things for those that are tuning in and joining us live this evening. If you have a question for myself or Tim, feel free to type that in at any point, and then when we get to kind of a natural break in the conversation, we'll go to some of those questions. So you're welcome to start typing things whenever you'd like. So if you know that there's a question that you've got for Tim that you'd like us to answer live tonight, you're welcome to go ahead and send that in right now, and then we'll get to it in just a little bit. Tim, we are gearing up for the end of the season. I know the Color Guard World Championships is taking place this weekend. 2 weekends from now will be the WGI World Championships. I know a lot of local circuits already had their championships last weekend or will be doing so this weekend and next. So we're really reaching the end of the competitive season here. And I thought we would kind of talk a little bit tonight about this point in the season in particular, what groups should be focusing on, what you focus on with your ensemble, and things of that nature. So I'd like to kick this off with a question for you about, at this point in the season, what do you typically focus on the most with your ensembles?
That's a good question, and this is a fun time of the year for all of us. You know, the shows are done. We finally got all the output actually on the floor. And it depends on the ensemble, but most of my groups, the main focus right now is just consistency and being prepared for everything that might happen. The one thing that I like to do a lot, and this is most of the things that I feel like I do well are because I've done them poorly in the past, and had to learn from that. One year in 08, RhythmX had a huge set in the back that we added finals week, and we did not practice the setup nearly as well as we should have, and ended up with a huge penalty in prelims. So preventing that from ever happening again is a pretty big priority for us. And one thing we found is really rehearsing what the actual flow is really helps. So whatever space you're in, marking out the 72 by 114, putting a front sideline on it, having a space, we usually do about 8 feet of space where the corner opens up. Make sure that everything's under the 11-foot ceiling that's behind the tunnel, and then timing that entrance. Realizing that in some of the venues we've been in up to this point, we've had more vertical space, or we'll do a horizontal timeline where the setup's really easy, everything just comes forward. And here we're confined to that, you know, stage left side of the floor. So practicing that and really making sure that everybody knows exactly where they're supposed to go all the time is a big priority. Figuring out the order of entrance. Lots of people like to put their electronics in first so that that can get plugged in right away. Making sure that people aren't crossing pathways. And realizing that that order has to happen in the parking lot. When you come around the building and you go down the tunnel and you end up in the tunnel behind, you can't switch in that tunnel. There's just not enough room. So your order has to be set up. That's a big priority for me.
This kind of goes hand in hand with what Tim's saying. One of the things I noticed at this point of the season is everybody's got their full show out on the floor now, and have all the props in, like everything's in, all the bells and whistles. And so this is when we get the largest number of traffic jams with groups trying to come in and trying to exit the building. So I think being prepared for that and realizing that, you know, if you're in world class and you have an 11-minute interval, that's 11 minutes in and out of the building. And if you get a little bit of pre-stage time as the previous group is exiting, that's a bonus. But you really want to make sure that you rehearse your ensemble into being that well-oiled machine that can get in and out with every piece of equipment in 11 minutes flat or 10 minutes or 9 minutes to make sure that the most important performances of the season go off without a hitch. So, Tim, thank you very much for that recommendation.
There's a couple other little tricks, too, I want to throw out there for people as they're preparing for that. Knowing how to fold your tarp. A lot of people will fan fold it into the middle so that it's able to come down from the back center just on this side of the 50, and then they're able to pull out half of it this way while we're still on our own side. A lot of people used to come down the sideline and then pull it halfway and wait. but where that sideline is where your pit needs to be coming down around if they're in the front, which 99% of them are. And then on the way out, a lot of people now have started folding over the front just a little bit before they fold it over the timeline, so the pit has a wider pathway to go out. And then when you do fold it halfway, you don't have to fold it halfway again. You just have to get it over the 50. So a lot of people will fold it not all the way to the end and have a couple people waiting back there so that they can fold the second half over and get over that timeline even faster.
Great recommendations. And if you're going to be joining us for World Championships this year, the best recommendation is to get in there and watch all the top groups, watch how they do it, because these are the elite groups in our activity that have really dialed in, not just their performances, but also getting on, getting off. So there's a lot that you can learn just by watching how RhythmX and all the other killer programs in our activity do this, and you might be able to pick up a couple of things that might work for you in your program as well. Awesome.
And there's a lot of things that you would never copy from another group, but folding your tarp, you might as well.
Absolutely. Well, why reinvent the wheel when some of our top flight groups have already kind of figured out and dialed in the way? And that's not to say that there's one way to do it, but if you watch 4 world-class groups and each one of them does it a different way, chances are all of those ways have merit to them and are pretty well dialed in, because those teams are going through all those details. As every second counts, certainly, at World Championships. I know one of the other things that a lot of groups are doing this point of the season is they're putting the final tweaks and modifications and changes onto their show. So maybe they've had a secret ending that they've been waiting all season to put out there and unveil, or they've got the whole show out there. It's been out there for a while, but they're really now trying to tweak and refine and make adjustments to kind of give it that special something to make sure that your season ends on the highest note possible. Tim, what are the changes and the tweaks that you find yourself making around this time?
That's a good question, and it depends on the group. RhythmX, we typically make some edits toward the end of the season. Historically, we've changed our ending a lot, like to the point where even at this last regional, the judges assume, oh, we know there's another ending. Like to the point where in 2013, we thought we were going to do that ending, and everybody said, we know that's not your ending. We're like, oh, I guess we have to do a bigger, better ending. So for a bigger group like that has kids that are really able to change things on the fly and don't need a ton of reps, I don't really mind making changes like that late in the season, especially this year because seems like we have a little bit of extra time. For younger groups, I would make very minimal changes. The amount of time we've spent with the younger students getting them muscle memory and training them to do exactly what we want. And then if you change something in the last 2 weeks, the amount of reps that they're going to get on that is just not even close to what it was before. So there I might add 8 counts to the end, or I might add, tweak a couple little facings or something like that. But for any of the scholastic groups, I'm mostly sticking with what we got. Centerville, for example, I changed the last maybe 32 counts of their ending. We added a little bit of music and changed some drill, but that was it, and I did it like a week and a half ago, so they had almost a month. For the younger students, getting all those reps in is super important.
On that note, is there anything that you specifically avoid doing at this point in the season?
Yeah, I avoid not changing parts of the show, but changing our perspective and how we treat the students and how we run our rehearsals. They've learned from us this long, and just because it's championships week or month, I don't want them to get any kind of anxious vibe or stressed out nature. Anything that we're feeling, they can feel that. I think a lot of instructors think that their internal monologue is hidden from the students, and it's not. They can read your face, they can hear the little things that you say to the staff member next to you, and they know if you're stressed out. So even if maybe you haven't done your job up to this point and you're not as prepared as you need to be, you can't stress out, because that turns into a bad performance for the students.
I know that's something I struggled with earlier in my career. Is I'd get to this point of the season and I tried to get my finals or championships mindset on, and I realized I was giving different kinds of information to the students. I was expecting different things out of them. All of a sudden, I was asking them to do things that I'd never mentioned at any point during the season, and it took a while. It took many years to start to learn the importance of that consistency. that you bring, that you on the first day of the season should be very similar to you on the last day of the season in terms of your messaging for the kids and your demeanor and all of those other things, because as Tim said, yeah, they can absolutely sense all of that. We wear that on our sleeves much more than we think we do, and students are very perceptive about that. So yeah, you may want to start talking to your students about elevating parts of their performance, perhaps the passion or the energy that they're putting into it or something like that. Maybe you're talking about some communication concepts that now that they're really comfortable with the responsibilities, you want them to try to bring to life more. You don't want to immediately do a right turn and completely change everything that you're expecting and asking of them, though.
And if you find something the last week of the season that you are changing, write it down and put it in a notebook or put a reminder on your phone that says, look at this document on the first day of the season next year and make sure that I've approached it consistently. Because like Caleb said, that the demeanor from day one to the end is super important that it stays consistent. And if you do find yourself wanting to change, give yourself a reminder next year that you wanted to do that sooner.
Well stated, so well stated. I think I mean, if you're watching this a recorded version later on, back up, watch that whole thing again, because there are years and years of wisdom and experience in all of this information that Tim just shared. So definitely absorb as much of that as you can. I'm wondering, now let's kind of shift away from the show necessarily and dive into the performers a little bit. We talked a little bit about not changing who we are in our messaging to the performers. Would you tell me, though, what kinds of information you do give your performers as they approach the end of the season?
In regards to their performance?
Yeah, just maybe some things that you would share with them now that you weren't focusing on or discussing maybe 3 weeks ago or something like that. And other things, you know, you as the educator, not the technician for the show, so to speak, but you as the educator, what are you sharing with your students at this point of the season in terms of their mindset?
Got it. One of the things that I have always thought is how they perform and what their persona is to the audience and to the judges. Should always look like the music feels to them. So we kind of went through a phase a while back where there was lots of overacting and lots of you know, head bobbing and aggressive smiling and spots that didn't need it. But reminding those performers that their faces should look to the audience like what the music feels like to them. However, we can impact that. Like we can say, okay, you know, Adrian, we need you, like your lips are too tight. If you just open up your lips a little bit, now you can hit that rim shot and you get a little bit more performance quality behind it. But I want it to be true to how you feel and not that I told you to do it or feel like this. And there's also, especially the scholastic groups, there's some kids that have just now figured out how to march and play. You know, like it's taken all season to learn the book and learn all the drill, and now it is time, even though we haven't changed, they can open up a little bit more where they're not so in their own head and having to think about everything where they can't perform.
Would it be fair to say that at this point you're trying to basically serve as, you know, hold the mirror up for those students and help them internalize what they look like as performers moving through their program?
Yes, and one thing that I've done in the past to hold the mirror up to the students is hold a mirror up to the students. Like we'll go into the dance room and we'll play in front of the mirrors that they have and show the kids this is what you look like. And if you're just standing there straight faced the whole time, you can see it. That also helps a ton with, we try to get in front of mirrors as much as we can for stick heights and all kinds of angles. You know, the technicians have a pretty hard job and they can't fix every single thing without some self-teching going on. Like the students have to be correcting some things as they go, and getting in front of mirrors really helps that. We also do a lot of things with video, where we'll video it. We've done a couple different versions. We'll video it and broadcast it on the big screen, like right away. We've found also that there's like the coach's eye, and there's some apps that people use right now where you can video the kids' hands and then turn it and show it to them right away and slow it down, and they can see the mechanics of exactly what's happening. And those are really useful and something that we didn't have 15 or 20 years ago.
And probably the best way to use those tools at this point is really as an awareness piece. You're not still breaking down all the details of the technique the way that you would have been 4 months ago, but just as a reminder, as a refresher, or as a quick spot check for those students to go, remember this, take a look at what this looks like right now, so that as they're moving through it during the course of their run or their dress rehearsal or their performance, they have that more in the forefront of their mind and are actively engaged with those concepts as they go through it. Well stated. One of the other things that I think you want to share with your students at this point of the season is to almost ease off the gas a little bit and just remind them about the journey that the whole entire season has been. We're certainly talking about gearing up for the final couple of performances of the season, and we want those to be the best they possibly can be. But we want to make sure that we also place some emphasis on their growth, on their development over the course of the season, and putting those final performances in the right perspective, trying to go out there and have a performance that they can feel really proud of, or one that elicits a strong response from the audience as kind of some of those overarching concepts that we want them to prioritize more than maybe some of the competitive aspects or things like that. I know, and Tim, I'm sure you've certainly experienced this a lot, going into World Championships, all of a sudden the stakes increase quite a bit because the competition pool is so much deeper. You're not head-to-head, with 5 groups the way you might be at a regular local show, or even with 20 groups the way you might be at a regional. If you're in Scholastic A, you're running against the full gamut of everything else. And so you just want to start to be able to find ways to define success for your program that are not necessarily a score or a particular placement, so that basically every ensemble that is competing here over the last couple of seasons has some way that they're going to be able to identify success that doesn't hinge on anybody else taking that success away from them, so to speak. Tim, any additional thoughts or things that you express to your students in that vein?
Yeah, I think the concept of them figuring out what is success for you. You know, most groups, that what is success is defined by their performance first, and then by the judges' community response to that second. And I think that's important. I think we can't control what the other groups do or what the judging panel is or what they decide to give us on that night. We can only control our version of it, our performance. And I think something that's important, and this is a personal thing, in the activity right now, making sure that we are reminded ourselves and our students that we all started doing indoor drumline because it was fun and because we enjoyed it. And the competitive aspect has blown up in the last 10 years, and we have so many great ensembles now, and the competition part of it, while still being really important, sometimes shifts the focus away from the reason that we all actually like to perform and design shows. And that's something I've really been talking to my students a lot about this year. That there's a lot of angry going on right now, and it's okay to enjoy this activity that we've built over the last 25 years.
Yeah, the competitive aspects aside, there has never been a time like there is right now to be involved in this activity. There's never been such an explosion of growth and talent and creativity that is just coming at you from all angles. So I think if we, both as professional educators, but as also just somebody that's in the activity, part of this community, if we fail to stop and recognize just how amazing everything is outside our own specific bubble, we're doing a disservice to ourselves and to also just how wonderful and amazing the activity is right now. So thank you for sharing that and putting those things in the proper perspective for us here as we approach the end of the season. Tim, before we kind of wrap up this first part, is there anything else that you want to share with everybody that you kind of think everybody, regardless of their class, whether they're Scholastic, Independent, Open, or World, things that you think everybody should be concentrating on the most during this time of the season?
I have one thing, and this is for everybody in our entire community, and I think that our audience could be a little bit more responsive to things that aren't perfect. I'm lucky enough to be involved with the color guard side of things, and my wife has been the director at Centerville for many, many years, and so I get the opportunity to go to color guard championships and see what that third of the activity is doing. And they're very excited about color guard in general, and there's a lot of applause and there's a lot of cheering. Sometimes it's maybe too much, okay? Like, as soon as it goes in the air, people are applauding whether they catch it or not. But I feel like our audience over the years has gotten so judgy, and they listen, and if it's perfect, then they go, that was perfect, and it's supposed to be, right? And if it's not perfect, they definitely don't clap. So I think a little bit more happiness from the audience and a little bit more response to how much effort is going into what the groups are giving, not just the top couple, but every single group, and then we could probably get off our hands a little bit more.
I love it. And to piggyback on that, this stuff doesn't happen by accident. When the crowd is going wild, that's because we've set up a norm for doing this. And for everybody that's watching this that has a group, the way that we do this is you go back and you talk to your students about what it means to be a great audience member and what it means to give back to the people that are performing for you. And you can talk about this in cyclic terms. Talk to them about how they want to feel when they're on the floor and the kind of audience they want to have for them, and then ask them to be that same audience, whether it's the 9 a.m. performance on Thursday at one of the venues with not a whole lot of people there, or whether it's the last 5 in Independent World on Saturday night. Everybody that's on the floor bearing their soul deserves that recognition, and certainly deserves our applause and enthusiasm for what they're doing. So yeah, let's get off our hands a little bit and make sure that we're reciprocating for all of that stuff that's coming off the floor for us. All right, a couple of questions that are coming in. So if anybody else has an additional one, feel free to jump into this and shoot it over here. We're still talking about this point in the season. What are the kinds of things that we're working on and focusing on? Tim just got this question. Musically, how important is it to get outside to play and rehearse at this point in the season? Is this the dry that we try to reproduce of the arenas? What are your thoughts on that?
Yes. As soon as you can get outside, get outside. And living in Ohio, I know that we don't have to travel. I get it. But the groups that have to get to play outside all year long, it's a really, I'm not going to say it's an advantage, but I wish that we could do that too. And anybody that's on this side of the coast that has to deal with rain and cold weather almost until now, you should get outside immediately. I think that UD is a really good house to play in. Like, I think that it sounds pretty good in most areas of the house, and it's not too boomy. And we've all dialed it in over the years. We know what it feels like in there. But I think getting outside and hearing what's actually going on is pretty huge. Do it as soon as you can.
Love it. Awesome. All right, let's transition into another topic right now. I want to talk classification with you briefly, specifically reclassification. I know several reclassifications took place last week, and that generated a lot of discussion around the activity. And I'm a member of the administration team, and I also sit on the steering committee. You're a member of the steering committee, and I know it's something that the two of us, plus the other 9 people that are a part of that process, we spend a lot of time and energy pouring into this to try to get it right, or as close to right and perfect as we can get it. Can you share with us, when we get to the end of the season and we're making those couple of final classification decisions, how do we go about making those final classification decisions by the steering committee?
Good question. The classification thing is, the steering committee, just so everybody knows, takes it very, very seriously. And even at a time like this last couple of weeks where we are super busy personally, like we're with our own groups, we're flying all over the place, we're still taking time to watch these videos of the groups that are appealing or that are potentially appealing for a reclassification. And the amount of work that goes into that, it's not just a thumbs up, thumbs down. There's discourse, there's a whole base camp set up where we're able to put in our input, and then that all gets weighed. And the members of the steering committee have varied backgrounds, and we've got some guys that are very front ensemble focused and some guys that are very visually minded, and all of the guys are always looking at the big picture. So having those different lenses to look at the shows through is really helpful, and we'll oftentimes say, well, this group, the tempo math might be a little bit more intermediate, but the step size responsibilities aren't, and the front ensemble is definitely doing basic skills and requires that kind of feedback. And we start to weigh those things out. And only when it's really obvious do groups really get reclassified. Like if there's ever a question, if there is a vote and it's split, they stay in the class that they're in. We're very careful to not put groups in a class that they don't belong in. And it's important to note that it doesn't really matter how they're scoring. If they're doing intermediate skills and they require intermediate feedback, then they should be an open class, even if they're not really killing it in A class, because the book's not written for A class. So we do take it very, very seriously, and I'd like to just throw it out there too, as like I talked about the color guard. The way that the color guards do it is that at the end of the season, if you medal, or if you're in the top 5, or if you're a finalist some years, they automatically bump you into the next class, no matter what. Whether your staff all leaves, whether you had 10 seniors, you know, and you have no choice. And that's just awful. Like a group that is an A-class group now has to compete with those 40 opens the next year. And so while this is not a perfect science, we're treating it as diligently as we can, and taking 9 groups and placing them in the class that they probably should have been in the first place. It is way better than the option.
Absolutely, and I'll echo all of that and add just a couple of things. It's an incredibly complicated process, and there are a lot of processes out there that would be much easier, including you know, the process that Tim outlined. I think our preference, and anytime we sit down and discuss this at the Percussion Advisory Board meeting, we always come back to, no, our classes should strongly be tied to skill sets, not a grouping of, you know, the third of the activity that is the best is world class and the third of the activity that is competitively the worst should be A class. We don't want a system like that. We want something where you're grouped based on the skill set, and then we have a competition of all of the groups that are using basic skills, and there's a different competition for all the groups that use intermediate skills, and a different competition for all the groups that use advanced skills. By and large, this year, groups self-classified themselves more accurately than we've had in at least a decade. And I think that's a testament to how hard local circuits are working on this, and how seriously instructors take trying to look globally. Don't just look at your own group, don't just look in your own backyard, but instead look at the entire activity. And don't look at it from the top down. Certainly don't look at the medalists in any class from the previous year as the barometer for that skill set. By the time they earn that medal, they may not have even been displaying those skills anymore because they reached the very apex of their season. You can't even look at just the finalists from the last year, because those represent the 15 best groups in the world at those basic, intermediate, advanced skills. You got to look at it from the bottom up. So you've got to look at the bottom of each class and work your way up to kind of find that class of best fit. Usually groups self-classify very accurately now. I think, Tim, when push came to shove, we were probably looking at 9 or so ensembles that were kind of on the bubble this year. It might have been a few more than that. But really, all of those bubble ensembles, you can probably make an argument that they show a mix of basic and intermediate, or a mix of intermediate and advanced. And then the really tough thing is for the admin team, and then afterwards for the rest of the steering committee, to really go through that process and carefully analyze and dissect all the attributes of that show to figure out where is that class going to be, or where is that ensemble going to be most appropriately classified. If you're looking for additional details on the process, in the education part of the percussion page on the WGI website, there's 5 classification videos that are up there that I've produced over the last couple of years. So there's a lot of great information in there, but hopefully this conversation can kind of serve as a benefit. One of the things that I want to add as well, because we get questions about this a lot of the time, is just how much everybody labors over this decision, and Tim touched on it, and I just want to echo it one more time. We have a base camp set up where we have these threaded conversations about each one of these ensembles that we're reviewing and evaluating, and the conversations are long and involved, and everybody comes there with a great deal of passion and wisdom and insight, and very meticulously evaluate all the different attributes in those shows. And as Tim mentioned, if the committee is split, then no reclassification happens. The groups that are reclassified are the ones that are overwhelmingly in one camp based on those 11 people that are weighing in on those decisions. So I think, Tim, we've even had some instances in the past where the committee was split but was in favor of classification, like 6-5 in favor, or 7-4 in favor, and the group remained where they were because we didn't feel that was a strong enough majority to really trigger that reclassification.
Yeah,
so it's a really...
I'd like to add to that, if that's okay, Caleb.
Yes, please.
One is that the term of being reclassified is the correct term for that. That's how we view it. I see a lot of people online talking about how, you know, we got promoted or we got bumped. It's just putting you in the class that you should be in based on your skill set. It's not a promotion like you've succeeded. You just wrote the show for a class that you're not in. And the other thing that I saw that really bothered me was that people say things like, well, I can't believe WGI did this to us. WGI, the company, has nothing to do with this. The people that are making this decision are the peers. It's the steering committee, and it's people like me and John Mapes and Tom Ungst and Caleb and Chris and Mark that have been doing this for a long time and have so much passion for it and for the activity itself. It's not WGI doing something to you. It's your peers making sure that the competition is fairest for everyone involved.
I did get one question that came in and said, would it behoove WGI, and I'm going to kind of substitute instead of WGI just the indoor percussion activity at large. Would it behoove the indoor percussion activity if the local circuits would address promotion, and again, not promotion, but reclassification? And I'll denote the difference between those two in just a second, more aggressively rather than waiting for WGI to do it. What do you think, Tim? Would it be helpful if local circuits were a bit more proactive about that?
I do think so. I think if it's really obvious on a local level, then yes, with the caveat that at a local level, the sample audience or the test sample may be not big enough. You know, like if you're let's say you have 5 A-class groups in your local circuit, and one of them is significantly better than the other 4, that doesn't mean that they're an open class group at all, and especially on a national level. They may be a perfect group to be right in the middle of A-class or even an A-class finalist. And that's something that we talk about a lot. Like, is this really intermediate skills, or is it, is this open, or is this just really good A? Like maximizing the basic skill set and having a good show and succeeding at it, you're allowed to do that. Like, that's the point. And just because you're successful doesn't mean that you're ready for the next class or you should be in the next class. So yes, local circuits should do more, but be careful to do it with people involved that have the national scope in mind.
I've had a lot of local circuits reach out to me over the years and go, well, we knew these guys were reclassified, but we were going to wait until after the regional and let WGI do it. And then the regional came and went, and WGI didn't reclassify them, so we're like, okay, we must be good. Just know that that's not necessarily a foolproof way to go about doing classification. We only reclassify groups live on site at the regional if they're like way, way, way out of bounds. But if it's instead like a close decision, we send that through the normal process of the admin team takes a look first and determines class of best fit. If it's early enough in the season, we'll send that notice to the group, and then if they choose to appeal that decision, then it goes to the steering committee, who will look at it again and figure out if we want to uphold and proceed with that reclassification. If it's late in the season, we kind of do the admin look and the appeal process through the steering committee all in one foul swoop, because we're getting really close to scheduled publication dates for world championships and things of that nature. So just competing at a WGI regional and not being notified between prelims and finals that reclassified doesn't mean that you're in that you'll remain in that class for the rest of the season. It just means no determination has been made yet. And really, if you're in the A or the open class, you're kind of under evaluation all season long. Because as we all know, appropriate classification can change over the course of a season. You may evolve and grow, especially with our A-class ensembles. Those students are growing and improving so much over the course of the season. You may evolve out of a basic skill set into an intermediate skill set as you go through the season. Just remember, it's not always the what, but it's a combination of the what and the how. Written book doesn't determine it. It's the skills asked of and demonstrated by the performers in the show. Tim, anything else to add on that one?
Yeah, just 2 other things. And the skill set, we're always really careful to not make a checklist, because a basic skill might be 8 on a hand, but if you take an independent world group, a Scholastic Open group, and a regional A group, and all play 8 on a hand, you can tell which one of them is world class, but it's the same skill. So it's a synthesis of looking at the skills involved, what their feet are doing, what the tempo map is, what their visual demands are, how many layered responsibilities there are. Is it a lot of front to back? But, and through the course of the season, you might go to the first regional and get no reclassification notice at all, and you put your closer on, and now all of a sudden the closer's at a faster tempo. It takes all of your skill sets and expands them. You beefed up the snare break in the opener. Like, all those things may change throughout the season.
Or just sometimes the student's musicianship and their touch and their maturity and their presence grow to the point where they exceed what basic descriptors would look like. So all of those things are in flux. at all times over the course of the season. Tim touched on this previously. I just wanted to add my 2 cents onto it. The difference between a promotion and a reclassification. Promotions are things that are triggered by the group themselves, so that's when an instructor is standing in front of their group at an early season rehearsal and goes, oh shoot, this isn't basic anymore, my kids are doing a phenomenal job, and they contact their local circuit or they contact WGI and say, please move us from A to open, or please move us from open to world. That's a promotion. That's when you self-identify the growth that's happened within your program. And that's always worthy of celebration, because it means you've got great awareness of the different paradigms of the activity, and it means your students have grown between one paradigm to the next, and that's no small feat. That's an amazing thing. A reclassification is not the notice that you get during, or a promotion is not the notice you get during the course of the season. When you get that notice that you're being reclassified, that's because the class that you're currently competing in, you no longer best fit that descriptor, and that you probably should have enrolled your ensemble in the other class from the get-go, because the skills and abilities, the expectations that should be applied, the feedback that the group needs really belong in that next paradigm. And the bump, that's not a term that we use for anything, just to clear that up. All right, if anybody has any other questions on classification, please feel free to send them in, and we can certainly tackle those couple of topics. It's something I know Tim and I spend a lot of time on, both individually as we look at this, but also as we discuss as a team and as a group. Tim, we've talked a ton about this. I just wanted to pick your brain on one other thing. Can you give us a little bit of insight into how you go about determining a class of best fit? I think you already kind of touched on this as you were talking about tempo map, and you were talking about, the dexterity of the performer and all those other things. Are there any other attributes of an ensemble that you might look for when you're trying to determine class of best fit?
Yeah. For me personally, I tend to think more visually. I'm a snare drummer at heart, but I've grown into a more of a visual-minded person. So I'm drawn to that first. However, most of the skills that I base my class of best fit decisions on are what their hands are doing, and what their hands are doing combined with what their feet are doing. And if the show's at 140, 148 the whole time, and they're taking moderate-sized steps, and what their skills are as a composite of the whole show, it's really hard, because maybe the snares rip out like one little lick, then it has some intermediate skills in there, but really as the whole show goes, they're mostly playing basic skills. If you play one flam drag, that doesn't mean you're open. It's in what tempo is that flam drag, and is it with body underneath it? There's no real recipe for it. I will say that a lot of the groups this year, I remember one in particular, one that got a lot of press on Facebook, was like unanimous, like instantly. As soon as everybody watched it, it was like, oh no, that's open. What are they even thinking? And then, so in a situation like that, some of that's just experience. We've studied it enough, and we've talked about the paradigms enough, and we've watched enough videos, and seen thousands of indoor drumline shows over the years, where you can say, oh yeah, that's definitely intermediate skills.
Just to kind of wrap up this conversation, I want to publicly acknowledge that this stuff is tough, and that there's no manual. I get requests all the time, like, can you just give us a list of the basic skills, please? And there's no way to do that. We don't have a checklist for any of this that defines exactly what that is, because it's a bit of a moving target every year, and one skill in isolation can't tell you the picture on classification. It's all context driven. That's why a submission of a written book doesn't tell us much about what class that presentation should be in, because we don't know the performers that are playing that written book. We don't know the visual context of any of those things. We don't know about the simultaneous responsibilities and the layered responsibilities placed on the performers. We don't know about the concepts that are used throughout the show, that kind of stuff. So just know that ahead of time, that this stuff is really complicated, and that we long ago determined the best way to do this is to get a bunch of really smart people, really knowledgeable people with diverse backgrounds, many of which are elected by their peer group, the steering committee, instructor representatives that are elected by the PAB, the judge steering committee representatives that are elected by the judging body. Get them together and let the wisdom of the room make those final determinations. So rather than go to one person that's the oracle and the keeper of all knowledge, Get 11 people that are all really bright, really intelligent, and are really careful with this. Get them together. And if 11 out of 11 say, no, that's an intermediate paradigm, or no, that's an advanced paradigm, that answer is pretty self-evident that way. And that even with all of the wisdom, even with all those smart people, a lot of the time those decisions will be right down the middle and will be split, and that's just kind of part of the process. That's the beauty of all of this. Frustrating as it may be, and inefficient as it may be from time to time, I think that's the way to go about doing right by all of our performers, not just for the ones that have been reclassified, but every performer that's trying to compete within an appropriate paradigm over the course of the season. We owe that to them to make sure that they're going to have a great level playing field when we get to a competition.
And I would spread the word also. If you're watching this, if you're one of the people that took your Tuesday night and are actually watching, you're probably not the problem. You're not the one that it doesn't get it, or you're really trying to figure it out. So spread the word to the people that wouldn't take the initiative to do something like this, because that's where most of the misinformation happens, I found.
And just have conversations about this. The more that we talk about this publicly and don't let it be this like secret taboo thing that makes us all uncomfortable, the easier it is for everybody to kind of wrap their head around it. I know I've logged hundreds of hours discussing classification. It's certainly not my most favorite topic in the world, but I understand the importance and the value of trying to get it right. And lastly, a quick plug for myself. As the education guy for WGI, I am always wide open and more than happy to engage in a conversation about this. So feel free to shoot me an email or to track me down on social media, and we can get a conversation going about this stuff. I'll answer any question you have about it, because we want to be as transparent and honest and open as we possibly can be about the process. We believe the more people that understand this accurately and spread accurate information rather than incorrect information or assumptions, the better and more healthy it is for our activity as a whole. And we think that that's essential to be able to maintain our 3 different paradigms and not just scrub the whole thing away and make it a free skate where everybody competes against everybody else. So to do that, to have delineation between the tiers, we have to have some process that's going to provide that delineation each season and kind of define it. One question for you, Tim, and this kind of circles back to some of the things we were talking about previously. Do you change your rehearsal schedule once you have moved into a semifinals or finals scenario? This person says, we have all seen the ensemble that over-rehearsed and didn't get the rest they needed as well. What are your thoughts on this idea?
Yeah, I don't like to change it that much. Like we talked about at the beginning of the video, the consistency for the performers, and especially when you're dealing with high school kids, they're creatures of habit, and changing their habits, even going from, like, let's say you normally rehearse 2.5 hours, like Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, every day or every week of the whole season. All of a sudden you put a 4-hour block in there, that I'll bet you by that last half an hour you're going to get some glazed over faces, because they've internalized what a rehearsal feels like, and how to pace their mental and physical energy to last through that rehearsal. So keeping the amount of time relatively consistent, I think, is definitely important.
Awesome.
Something to consider with that too, kind of an inside thing. You should start doing your warm-ups longer right now. Like, if you're going to be in the lot, and we've got a million hours of warm-up time because we have all this space, and what they've been used to is running through Kettering Fairmont High School and playing in the band room for 11 minutes and then going out on the floor. That was their warm-up. And now they're like out there and they're in the sun. Don't forget sunscreen. Don't forget sunglasses if you want them. It's a totally different experience. So, and I would recommend for the staffs to take that block and really budget out your time so that the time where they're actually warming up is a little more similar to what they've been used to throughout the season. We take our time during that, getting the truck unloaded. They can tune, they can do a little bit of subs, but doing like full ensemble rehearsal, unless you've already been doing that all season, can sometimes be kind of a culture shock for kids.
Awesome. So well put. Hey, one of the things that we've had in the activity a lot over the last couple of years has kind of been an explosion of growth in our independent classes, which I love to see. My hat's off to every independent group that exists out there, because As a former director and founder of one myself, I know how difficult it is to just even get that off the ground and up and running. Tim, I know you and I kind of have that shared history of doing that and tackling that whole project. Can you give us, all of us that are tuning into this, a brief history of the formation of RhythmX, how it came to be, and how you got your start, and kind of your origin story to get the program to where it is today?
Sure.
In 2 minutes or less, really.
I can do it in under 2 minutes. It started in 2002, and Craig Dunn is the founder of the group, and he started it after he left Westerville South High School and wanted to keep teaching drums. And they had a lot of students that had graduated in recent years. The Columbus, Dayton area had a lot of relatively good percussion students at the time, and started out an open class. And it was really kind of a very not a fraternity-like feel, but it was very college-age kids, lots of fun. You know, that it wasn't an organization. It was a drum line. You know what I mean? Like the major difference between the two. Like we did competitions, and we had an organization, kind of, but it was really just about making a show and having drummers do drummer things. Throughout like 03, 04, 05, we started to grow a little bit more design-wise and moved into world class in our second year. And then once we started to have a little bit more competitive success, like around 04, 05, then we started to draw more talent from other places. And it wasn't just like locally based. And we found that one of our best recruiters are our kids who enjoyed the group and then would go march in a drum corps in the summer and say, hey, why don't you come be in RhythmX? And they're like, well, no, I live in North Carolina. And they're like, well, so? And so we've had some kids that have commuted really long distances, and I know a lot of the independent groups do. But once that started, we kind of went through a new era of we've got a lot of talent coming in from far away. Then in like the 2012, 2013, somewhere in there, the bubble got burst with people realizing, oh, why am I driving 9 hours both ways every weekend? And we started putting apartments together for people where, okay, this kid's coming from Delaware, he's just going to move here for a year. He's going to live here. And so we started getting that outside talent coming in and just staying there, which has been really great for Dayton and Columbus, that we have a lot of teachers now that are kids that came to RhythmX to drum, but then liked Dayton or the people and stayed, and now they teach all the high schools in the area, which is really great. And then over the last, it kind of transitioned in 2013. 2012 was not a low point for us, but it wasn't a very successful year in a lot of ways. Like, we lost all of our rehearsal space. We ended up rehearsing in an abandoned warehouse that was just the size of the tarp. Like, there was no going up and listening to Ensemble at all. It had a leaky roof. It had a gas leak. People were getting carbon monoxide poisoning. It was not good. So in 2013, it was like, okay, we need to kind of figure the organization part out first, or else we can't go on, really. And that's when Tim and Andrew and I, we added on Mike Scott as an administrator to do a lot of the things that as designers we didn't have the time to do. And then since then, the organization has grown. It's into a bigger umbrella. We've got the Dayton Dragons drumline, the Cincinnati Growl, Bengals drumline. European X has partnered with us now, and we started a Wins group called RhythmX Wins. And so now our footprint is a bit bigger, and definitely more of an organization and a company that also has a drumline.
Yeah, that's huge, and I know that that's not that's not where all independent groups are, but I think there's a kernel of how it got started and what it's turned into that's probably a very similar path for almost every independent group that's out there. Somebody has a vision for this and sees a need where there's a set of students that are not currently well served, and you just want the percussion ensemble or you want the drumline to exist, and then you realize, oh my gosh, there's logistics that we have to figure out. Like, I can't just have a drumline. I also have to be able to get down the road with this organization, and we need to be able to have supplies and equipment and all that other kind of stuff. And it's not something that ever happens overnight. It takes a long time to do that and to build it up. But if you do it smartly and with sound footing and a sound foundation, you can build really cool and awesome things. And I think that's what we're seeing in the activity right now with how many independent percussion ensembles exist, which is, again, so difficult to do given the capital overhead that you have in terms of equipment and the need for trucks and semis and really expensive instruments and all of that stuff. It's phenomenal, and I think I can speak for everybody in saying RhythmX is certainly an inspiration in that regard, that, you know, it started from nothing and then has risen up through the activity and is certainly a standard bearer for a lot of things that go really well in this activity.
Well, thank you for that. And hopefully the other groups, all these new independent groups, are able to look at the groups that are established now and that really have the organization part of it down and look to them for advice. So come to us. I know that a lot of my peers would be glad to share that information, because even though we started on a shoestring and made a million mistakes on the way, that doesn't mean you have to too. So feel free to learn from our mistakes.
That's so wonderful, and people, please do take him up on this. Everybody in this activity is so wonderful and so great, and not only Tim, but all the people involved in all the programs that we all look up to. They're all very approachable and very open to providing back advice and to letting other people learn from the missteps along the way. I think we're all fans of the activity first, and then work with our independent, with our particular group second. But anything we can do to grow the activity and continue to make this an amazing experience for students beyond just the ones we stand in front of, I think everybody's on board with doing that. Tim, self-reflection time. Tell me, are there some things that you wish you could go back and tell the younger version of yourself in this activity?
Yeah, like a million. I mean, sometimes RhythmX's show this year is actually called Looking Back, and so this has been a very reflective year for me and for the group. Yeah, it's weird because I kind of wish that I would be able to tell myself when I was 21 what I know now, but if I really was able to do that, I wouldn't have learned all the lessons that I did along the way. So I do wish that I would have known the same things that I do now, but I'm glad that I didn't, because I was able to learn them in a way that got me to where I am right now. One thing that has changed over the years, and a lot of my friends can attest to this, is I've got kids now. When I first started off, I was very Machiavellian in my teaching style, and that the ends justified the means, and there was probably a lot of terms for my teaching style, but we'll say it was aggressive. And I'm much nicer now. And in some ways, I wish that I had some of that fire. But the fact that you're teaching these students and that they are people and that they're somebody's kid is something that as you get older, you realize a lot more. So I would probably tell my younger self to just be a little nicer in general to the students, because they're people too. They're not just dots, and they're not just the makers of your music. But as far as what I could change, I don't know. I always wonder right now what I'm doing with this show that I think is the best thing ever, that in 10 years I'm going to look at it and laugh at myself. Like, you really thought that was cool back then? Because there's stuff, I mean, even thinking back, it's been 10 years, or '08 was gone, and there's things in that show now that I look at, I'm like, oh, what were you thinking? You really thought that was cool? So I don't know. I wouldn't really change much.
Awesome. I love that advice. I love the idea that, we're all on a journey, and whoever we are today is as a result of all those experiences that have gotten us here. But I also know that, we're all standing on the shoulders of giants in this activity and the marching arts in general. So the more we can help other people understand some of those missteps and some of those pearls of wisdom, the better and healthier the activity is. So thank you for being so honest and so self-effacing in sharing that back with some of the younger instructors and designers and educators that I know are watching this, and trying to hone their craft, trying to make sure that they're giving their students the first-class experience that I think we want all students in this activity to have. We've gone just about an hour now, Tim, so I think we're getting pretty close to wrapping this up. Before we do so, is there anything else that we didn't cover tonight that you want to share, or that you want to get out there and make sure everybody knows?
The stuff that we talked about, I think, is all very accurate and important. The idea that this activity is something that we all love, like I said, this has been a reflective year. In our show at RhythmX, it looks back on our shows. Like, we do kind of a rewind of all 16 of the shows in like little 4-second segments, But then after that, we look back farther at WGI itself. It's the 40th anniversary for the activity, for the company of Winter Guard International, and the 25th anniversary for percussion, which started on a stage with marching band costumes and no movement at all. And to think that, so talking about the show, like the second part of it, we actually give shout outs to some of the like Riverside Community College, Dartmouth, North Glen, some of these groups that came before us even that were shaping the activity. And some of those years I find are some of my favorite years, like 99, 2000, some of those years where we were all figuring it out on our own in different parts of the country, and then bringing it together and competing. Oh, they're doing that. That's cool. Now with the internet and all the visibility that everybody has, there's not that like surprise factor. So I don't know. I think just the appreciation for the activity that we do have, that it literally came from nothing. It came from nothing, and we have this indoor drumline activity that we all love. I think it's just important to appreciate it and to treat the other people in the activity in that same way, that we're lucky. Like, we're lucky to have indoor drumline, and we should act like it.
Absolutely. As we gear up for World Championships, I just want to share with everybody how excited I am to see all the performances this year. I think this is going to go down as a really special year in our activity. I know that there are a lot of phenomenal programs out there and a lot of young people that are doing amazing things on the floor in all classes, in all paradigms, at all 4 of our World Championship sites. But I think with this being the 40th anniversary of the organization as a whole and the 25th anniversary of the percussion activity, this will certainly be a World Championships to remember for many, many years. So I'm excited to everybody that's going to be joining us and participating in that. I look forward to seeing as many different performances and seeing as many different friends as I possibly can from all across the country that are in here for what is, for me, my favorite week of the whole entire season. The closing thing I'd like to ask everybody is to just make sure that that you're being as real with your performers as possible over the last couple of weeks. Be honest, show them your humanity, talk to them about the bigger picture of this activity, talk to them about the ways that we're hoping it is changing lives, so that they can have the right perspective going into that World Championships experience. Tim and I talked on that proper perspective earlier, keeping competition in the right mindset and making sure that you go in with some achievable goals that are not necessarily going to be dictated by external factors, but instead by your own internal metrics. So definitely do all of that stuff. Definitely take heed of all of that. And I also want to thank everybody that's joined us for these 4 webinars that we've done this season. It's been enlightening for me to hear so many amazing people from the activity share their wisdom and what they're passionate about. And I really appreciate everybody that's tuned in live and has asked so many great, phenomenal questions this season. And also all of those that have tuned in and watched the videos that we've posted afterwards and have sent me quick notes of thanks and gratitude and kudos for this existing. I've had a blast doing it. I plan to do this again next season, so we'll just keep it going. And if anybody has any additional feedback for us, shoot me a quick email. I would love to get your ideas about ways that we can make this series even better, ways that we can give you even better information to make your success in this activity continue to flourish. My email address is caleb@wgi.org. Hit me up over there. And Tim, thank you again so much for joining us. If you didn't recognize everybody, Tim is out on the road right now, beating that path of trying to help groups all around the country become as successful as they can be. So Tim, thank you for carving out some time for us and joining us this evening.
Absolutely. Thank you, Caleb.
Awesome. Thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate you coming out, and we'll see you at World Championships.